Hey YouTube pals, welcome back to the Studio Test Kitchen. I'm Lily, and today we are talking about when things go wrong on Thanksgiving. We're gonna go through some worst case scenarios and some quick fixes to get dinner on the table. Who wants to learn? So a lot can go wrong on Thanksgiving. We all know that. Today, what I'm gonna prove to you is that there are ways to come back from pretty much any setback you might find at the grocery store or in the kitchen. For this first simulation, we are imagining we can't find Brussels sprouts. So we've swapped for cabbage. We're using cabbage because it is always available almost everywhere. It stays good forever. What we're gonna make with our cabbage is a roasted cabbage dish, which is gonna give us that roasted Brussels sprout flavor that we like on a side. We're gonna make a pancetta vinaigrette jam that's gonna go over it, which is gonna give us some rich, meaty flavor, which we also like on Thanksgiving. To start, we are going to chop our cabbage. So rule number one, get a sharp knife. Get your cabbage flat so it doesn't roll around. As flat as you can. You can trim off the bottom if it's round on the bottom and just go down the center. Leave this root intact. We're gonna use that to keep our cabbage wedges in a wedge shape. If it falls apart, don't panic. You can always squish it back together. So straight in half, cut these into 1-inch wedges. Again, keeping the root intact, and lay them on a parchment-lined sheet pan. You really have to season your cabbage. A little sprinkle is not gonna do here, and you wanna rub it into every little crevice. First things first, drizzle with olive oil. We're gonna do one side and then the other. You're gonna be like generous, bordering on heavy-handed here. So really rub that salt and oil in. Pepper. Make sure you get the top, sides, backs, all the bits. And now that we're seasoned and oiled, we're gonna go in the oven. This is gonna go in the oven at 450 for 25-30 minutes-ish. Keep an eye on it. When the edges start to get brown, we want some color on this. We want some like burnt crispy bits. Take it out, flip it, let it go about 10 minutes on the other side so both sides get color. And when both sides are brown to your desired degree, pull it on out. We're gonna make our dressing now. Our dressing is gonna be a pancetta vinaigrette. The way that we're gonna start here is that we're gonna render some pancetta. Similar to cooking bacon at home, you're gonna start on a cold pan. What that's gonna do is allow the fat to render out slowly without it getting super crispy, which gets the fat cooked off a little bit, which we're gonna use for our vinaigrette. We can crisp this up as much as you personally like. I like salad bar bacon bit crispy. If you like them a little bit on the chewier side, just pull them a little bit earlier. So make sure you have a slotted spoon nearby, a spoon with holes. When this is done rendering, we're gonna pull it out of the fat. We're gonna set the fat aside and we're gonna use a little bit of it in our vinaigrette. If you have extra, you can save it to fry potatoes or use as a cooking fat, whatever you wanna do with it. Just don't put it down the drain. Your plumbers thank you. This is how I like my bacon bits. I like them dark and crispy, so I am ready to pull them. If you have more than a tablespoon of oil in your pan, drain off the rest. I have just the right amount that I want. I want about a tablespoon in here. If you don't have any fat for some reason, just add a little bit of olive oil. So I'm gonna set this aside to drain off. Into my pan, which I've now turned down to a medium-low heat, I'm gonna put in a finely diced shallot. If you don't have shallot, you could use the green part of a scallion or like a quarter of a white onion. And I'm just gonna sweat these out. So I'm just looking for them to get aromatic and turn translucent. As always, a little bit of salt and pepper. The pancetta can be a little salty already, so just be mindful of that. Season to taste. It's advice for life. When we cook this in the fat and it gets translucent, it's gonna take some of the sharpness out. It's gonna have that sweet onion flavor. I'm gonna deglaze my pan now. This is sherry vinegar. And I'm gonna scrape up any of the pancetta bits from the bottom of the pan. This I'm gonna cook off so the acid just kind of mellows out a little bit. You definitely wanna use cherry vinegar if you can find it. You could also use red wine vinegar. And now that this is deglazed and the vinegar is cooked off a little bit, I am going to add the rest of my ingredients. I'm gonna whisk in 1 teaspoon of maple syrup and 2 teaspoons of Dijon mustard. And we're just gonna get that fully incorporated. I wanna make it sort of drizzleable, so I'm gonna add just a spot more of oil I'm gonna taste it and season with salt and pepper just to make sure it's delicious. Taste as you're going. You can correct as you're going. If you wait till the very end and you have elements that are bland that have already been built on, it's gonna be more difficult to come back. Let's make a cabbage plate. Whoa baby, mamma mia. All right, look at this. See, this is exactly what we want. We want the crispy edge bits. All the leaves have moved apart, so all that seasoning that we rubbed in there is gonna be in every little crevice. Cabbage will shrink a lot when cooking. Most of cabbage is water, so this is gonna be smaller than that big head that we had. Let's plate. We are going to garnish this with our pancetta vinaigrette jam, our bacon bits, and some chives. I'm gonna go vinaigrette first. Similar to when we were seasoning, I wanna make sure every bit, every little nook and cranny gets its own little hat of jam. If you have extra of this, serve it on the side. Pancetta bits. I'm gonna use all of them. And chives. You can't overdo it with chives with something green, especially on a meal like Thanksgiving. Any chance to get a pop of green on your plate is gonna be good. And there she is. So it was pretty easy to solve the great Brussels sprout conundrum of our Thanksgiving. Don't you agree? Let's set this aside and let's talk about what happens if we can't find something else important. Let's talk about green beans on Thanksgiving. Green beans are seasonal in the spring. Thanksgiving is a very strange time to eat them. So if we need a sub, we're gonna go ahead and use beets. Beets are a root vegetable, a storage crop. Here we have a golden beet and a standard red beet. They come in all sorts of varieties. If you have a local farmer's market, they'll have some striped ones and some swirly ones. Get a whole smattering if you have the opportunity. If not, just get whatever you have around. Beets are super easy to prep. You're gonna cut the greens off just right below this nub. If it has a little tail, you can just take that off. We're gonna roast these whole. We're not even gonna peel them. This golden beet is so dang pretty. Look at that. Beets sometimes come in a little dirty. Just give them a good scrub. You can use a vegetable brush, the rough side of a clean sponge, or just use your hands. We're gonna peel them after they're roasted. For the greens, you can put these in anything you can use as soft green like chard or kale. You can put them in an omelet, put them in a stir fry. Here I have my tray of scrubbed cleaned beets. So I'm just gonna add these there. Keep the golden on one side, the red on the other. Hopefully they won't bleed together. They might, it's fine. We are going to dress these with salt, pepper, olive oil, some thyme, and I'm gonna smash some garlic cloves, which is gonna give it a nice little aromatic punch. Smashing is just gonna release some of these oils. Put this on your board and smash, just like it sounds. Roasted beets are great to make in advance because the longer they cool, the easier they're gonna be to peel. You can make this like even a day or two in advance if you want. You can eat it hot, you can eat it cold. I've added my whole sprigs of thyme and my crushed garlic in here, and now I'm gonna dress it with some salt, pepper, and olive oil. You wanna be generous with your olive oil, salt, and pepper here. We're gonna spin these around, make sure all the surfaces get oil, salt, and pepper. Next, we are going to cover this really tightly with a piece of foil. And we're gonna put them into a 375 oven. Depending on how big they are, you can go up to maybe even 2 hours with these. Just check them periodically, pierce them with a sharp knife when it goes all the way through, they're ready to pull. After we roast our beets, we're gonna make this a really classic side of roasted beets, a tangy cheese, a toasted nut, a lemony mustard dressing, and it's gonna be really delicious. Off to the oven. Our beets are in the oven. While those are going, I'm gonna prep everything else. I'm gonna chop up my nuts and get my dressing all ready. All right, for our dressing, we have 1 cup of oil, a half cup of lemon juice, 1 shallot minced, and a tablespoon of mustard. And we are going to just whisk this all together until fully emulsified. As usual, salt, pepper, and as this sits, the acid from the lemon juice is gonna pickle and kind of soften up this shallot. So let this sit a little while to mellow out. It won't be so raw and sharp, it'll cook a little bit in the acid. Ceviche style. What a lot of people are looking for when they're making sides for Thanksgiving is something to contrast the rich, heavy flavors of something like mac and cheese, mashed potato, turkey. This is bright and acidic, and that's intentional. It's gonna bring a really bright element into an otherwise heavy meal. Next up, we have hazelnuts. These have been toasted in the oven, and then I've just rubbed them around to take the skins off. Just a rough chop on these. They don't need too much uniform. This is a textural element. We'll stop there. I'm gonna go grab our beets. They've been out of the oven for a while. I've let them cool to room temperature, a little cooler than that. That makes them super easy to peel. If you have time, you can put them in a bowl, cover them with plastic wrap, put them in the fridge overnight. The skins will just fall right off. So these are warm-ish. Cool enough to handle is the most important part here. If you are very sensitive about getting your hands colored in any way, you can use gloves. You can use kitchen towels. I'm just gonna use good old-fashioned paper towels. The easiest way to do this is to just pick one up and rub it off. It's just gonna peel right off. This makes it so much easier than peeling before you roast. Slide it right off. And when it is done, put it on a surface that you either don't mind getting stained or is easily washable. And then we're gonna do that for every last one. We have peeled our beets. We are gonna cut these up and plate them. If you have any rough bits on the edge of your beet, just go ahead and trim it off. Now's a good time to clean those up. Half moons, quarter moons, wedges, anything goes. I'm gonna switch up my shape. I'm gonna get crazy. I'm gonna go with some half moons here. Maybe I'll go full rounds. I think this is enough for right now. In my roasting pan, I have these whole cloves of garlic and some beet oil. Look how pretty it is. And I'm just gonna spoon some of this over. It would be such a shame to let it go to waste. Just gonna grab our dressing real quick. Give it a little stir to re-emulsify it. If it's been sitting for a while, don't forget to taste it. And this is gonna be good all week. This is gonna be great on a salad. I'm just gonna spoon this over. I'm not gonna toss this like a traditional green leaf salad. I don't want the colors of beets to bleed over each other. I'm also gonna serve remaining dressing on the table on the side, so if people want more dressing, they can have it on their own. We are going to garnish with our chopped hazelnuts. We're just gonna crumble some goat cheese on top. You can just do this with your hands. We're using fresh goat cheese here. You could use Parmesan that you grate with a vegetable peeler, any sort of fresh cheese or an H cheese, really whatever you have around. Beets and goat cheese though, classic pairing. I have some chives left over from something I made earlier. Pretty much any soft herb will be great on this. I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a little spot of green. This is so pretty. We can eat this warm, cold, room temperature, what have you. I'm gonna set this aside, make a couple more things, and we are gonna have it with our Thanksgiving meal. Welcome to our next simulation in which we cannot find cranberries at the grocery store. So instead of making a cranberry sauce, we're gonna make a roasted citrus relish. It's gonna give us bitter notes that are gonna cut through richness, which is the function of cranberry sauce on your table. To get started, we are going to make some thinly sliced rounds of some citrus. Here I have a navel orange, a grapefruit, and a lemon. Half of each of these, the rest of it is gonna go on our relish, and a whole lemon. To get started, just take off the pithy end. And when I say paper thin, I mean thin enough that we can see the sunlight through it, but not so thin it turns into a cracker. We're just gonna do the same thing with our grapefruit, thin slices. If they're not totally perfect, that's okay. The only totally perfect person in this world is Lionel Richie. We all know that. We have thinly sliced all of our citrus. This is a half a grapefruit, a half a navel orange, and an entire lemon. This is 3 tablespoons of sugar, and I'm just gonna eyeball about a tablespoon of oil. I'm gonna give it a little bit of salt, and I'm just gonna stir to coat. Lay these flat on a parchment-lined baking pan. If you have a Silpat, you can use one of those too. We're gonna put this in the oven at 350 for 20 to 30 minutes. Keep an eye on it. We want it to be kind of crispy and golden. If it gets burnt, that's good. I want bitter notes in this. That's what we're going for with this dish. I have already supremed a bunch of fruit. Supreming citrus is just cutting out the wedges while avoiding the membrane. It sounds complicated. It's actually pretty simple. You are going to take the top and the bottom off your fruit, and you're just gonna carve off the pith. We can clean this up when we're done. The pith is anything in your fruit that is white. We are already getting bitter, pithy notes from our roasted citrus, so we don't want any here. This is our fresh element. Here's my bowl of Supremes. Just hold this over the bowl. Be mindful of where your knife is. You're gonna cut on either side of the membrane and then just pop it out. Real simple. All right, beautiful. Whatever is left in here, you're just gonna squeeze into the bowl. Wow, that's like, you remember those fruit cups from the 90s? Look at that. Look at all of this beautiful citrus. It's a citrus party, and you're invited. Let's go get our roasted citrus. This has roasted. See how we got these little brown bits? These are kind of like citrus chips. The sugar has cut through some of that super bitterness. We're gonna tear these into little pieces and add them to our citrus segments. I'm just gonna chop them into small pieces. You can tear them, you can chop them, you can put them whole. You can do this with a knife, you can do this with scissors, whatever works best for you. This is a 1/4 cup or so of parsley leaves. Just gonna put a small handful in, let my guests season to taste. And what I really wanna do is finish this with some flaky salt. This is a nice chunky finishing salt. It's gonna help break up all these bitter notes. And there she is. Look, we didn't have cranberry sauce. And look what we did. We're gonna put it in Grandma's citrus bowl. This is so bright and pretty. There it is. If you're making this in advance, cover it with some plastic wrap, throw it in the fridge, save some parsley to dress right before you serve. We're almost ready, so I'm just gonna keep it out, and I'll see you soon. For simulation 4, there's been a turkey famine, and we don't have turkeys, which could happen to you. So we are making roast beef. This is going to be lower lipped than an entire turkey. It's gonna be hard to mess up. I'm gonna show you the perfect method for doing this. This dish is going to be a roasted beef tenderloin with a sherry-dijon pan sauce. 2 important things when prepping your beef. 1, you wanna get this out of the fridge into room temperature. Take it 20, 30, an hour before you're planning to cook it. You want it to be room temperature all the way through. You also wanna blot this totally dry. Get any remaining moisture off of it. That's gonna ensure that you get a really nice crust when you cook it in the oven. As with all things on your Thanksgiving table, you are going to be generous with your salt and pepper. This is our weeknight hero spice blend. This has some onion powder, some garlic powder, some dried herbs. You can find it on the Blue Apron Marketplace. Let's get this in the oven. This is gonna go at 400 degrees for 20 to 30 minutes. If you have a meat thermometer, this is a great time to pull it out. We're looking for an internal temp of 110 degrees. Let's get it in. We are going to reverse sear this beef when it comes out of the oven. So to do that, we wanna get a pan ripping hot. We have a fully cooked tenderloin that's gonna come out, but we're just gonna crust up the sides. So we're just gonna go maybe 1 minute on each side, and it's gonna give you that brown, crusty exterior with a guaranteed non-overdoing, dried out beef roast. I'm gonna know that this pan is hot enough when the oil is real shimmery. We're gonna give it a minute or 2. I'm just gonna make sure the bottom is nice and coated. Here is my roasted beef roast. As you can see, it's shrunk down a little bit. It's totally normal. This pan is ripping hot. Let's get it in there. Woo. Reverse searing is great because this is already cooked inside, but we're missing that crunchy, seared exterior flavor. That's really the signature thing that you want with a piece of meat. So we're gonna get that without drying this out. We're just gonna go, 1 to 2 minutes on all sides of this. Ooh. So we're getting this dark, crispy crust, which is going to be delicious. This is seared on all 4 sides. I'm gonna pull it out. I'm just gonna rest this on something that I can drain on. I'm gonna give this like 10 or 15 minutes so that when I slice it, it's not gonna lose any of its delicious juices. My beef is resting. We are going to make our pan sauce. We have here chicken stock, chicken demi-glace, Worcestershire, sherry vinegar, and a whole grain mustard, some butter, and some creme fraiche. We are going to heat up the fond in our pan, which is any of the fat and little bits that get left behind. We're gonna scrape this up after we deglaze the pan. You don't wanna do this when it's super hot, otherwise your stock is gonna burn off and sizzle in you. Stock in, demi in. Demi-glace is a cooked down, reduced stock product, so it is kind of like stock, but just thicker and more concentrated. Our mustard and our creme fraiche. I am going to get this up to a simmer. I'm gonna whisk it around, scrape up any of the bits left behind. This is gonna reduce, which is gonna bring all the flavors together, but it's not gonna thicken a ton until we add the butter, which we're gonna do off the heat. My sauce is a little bit reduced in volume. I've tasted it and it's concentrated and salty and delicious. I'm gonna turn off the heat and whisk in 3 tablespoons of butter. And that's what's gonna make this sauce glossy, emulsified, rich. That's what's gonna turn this sauce into a sauce. I'm gonna stir in a couple tablespoons of chives. Because this is Thanksgiving, we should just go ahead and put this in a gravy boat. It's not a gravy, so it's not the thickest sauce we've ever made. Perfect. Next thing we're gonna do is cut our beef, and we are almost ready for our full Thanksgiving dinner. When slicing beef, you wanna identify where the grain is, which is the lines of the muscle of the beef, and you're gonna cut against it. So instead of going with the grain, you're going against the grain. Thickness here is personal preference. I'm going like medallion sized. This is a very, very good alternative to a turkey roast and a good solution for any time you might need a big center plate on your table. We're gonna dress our beef with just some of this pan sauce, not all of it, just enough to, get that pop of color on there. Beautiful. That is a holiday beef roast, my friends. The beef is very tender, the sauce is rich. Should we get into some cabbage? Honestly, if I closed my eyes and you told me that was a Brussels sprout, I would believe you. All right, beets. These beets are so sweet. I could eat this with anything rich and it would really stand on its own. That's it, we did it. We saved Thanksgiving. Look at our beautiful work. Look at what we've done. Thank you for coming to my We're Saving Thanksgiving party. Thanksgiving is not about turkey. It's not about green beans. It's not about Brussels sprouts. It's about gratitude and resilience. Tell me what your Thanksgiving is about. I wanna know. See you guys later. Pew.